Hey, 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 and welcome to the Grit and Wit podcast, where we chat about what it looks like to live out Christianity and how we can have fun and enjoy life in the process. I'm your host, Rebecca Caldwell. Welcome to the party. Hello, friends. Welcome back. I'm so glad you're here with me today. Happy Tuesday. It's going to be a good time here on the podcast. I think it's always a good time. I mean, I'm a fun girl, right? It's a fun time. Let me tell you about the fun adventure I had last night. Yesterday, I hear some birds going crazy in my backyard, so I run back there, and sure enough, my dog Josie, she's a boxer, and she is messing with a baby bird. I get her away from the bird and get her inside. I wait around for a little while, and then I go check out to see if she's harmed this bird. So I go look for the baby bird. I find it, and it's moving around. It's still moving around. It's breathing. I can see that it's breathing. And I'm just like, okay, all right. So I go back inside. I don't really want to mess with it. It's still daylight outside. So I come back in, and I'm just praying. And I'm like, God, please let this baby bird fly away. Please don't let anything be wrong with it. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. And I cannot stand for animals to be hurt. I have just this bleeding heart when it comes to whatever animals it might be. It starts to get dark out, and I'm like, I cannot leave this baby bird out there. And so I go out. I put some gloves on. I go out, and it lets me scoop it up, and it's not trying to get away from me. It's not trying to run or anything, and I just hold it. So I bring it in. I put it in a shoebox, and with a towel, I let it sleep inside last night. Well, I did some research, and it turns out that fledglings actually live either on the ground or in really short bushes for a couple of days to maybe a week before they get their big boy feathers and can actually fly. So they just kind of hop around and learn to use their wings. So, okay, well, maybe nothing's wrong with it. Maybe it just can't fly. This morning, I get up early and go put it back outside. And sure enough, the mama bird has been feeding it. It's hanging out by my fence, and I just now have to keep a sharp eye on my dogs. I can't let them just in the backyard. I have to just go out with them and make sure that they don't mess with this baby bird. So there's my adventure. I am praying that its big boy feathers come in and it can fly far, far away, because that is really stressing me out. I'm just like, please let this bird be okay. Legit praying about it. Okay, God, I'm going to need you to come through for me on this thing and let this baby bird be okay. So if y'all want to pray for that, I am not going to be mad at you about it. Anyway, speaking of fun times, there's going to be a really fun time coming up for the month of June for all ladies 13 years and up. I think last episode I might have said 16 and up, but it's actually 13 and up. Ladies in the Miss Lou, Cornerstone Church is going to be hosting Rejuvenate Women's Gathering. Yours truly gets to speak on the second night, so it's every Monday night from 6:30 to 8:30. There's lots of fun things planned, and we want you to be there. So if you are in the Miss Lou area, make sure to check that out. There is a Facebook page called Rejuvenate Women's Gathering, and you can find more information there. Also, shout out to my girl Cheryl Nee, who left me a review over on iTunes. It says, my Rev sister, Rebecca Caldwell, is amazing, and she uses her spiritual gifts in such an amazing way by recording this podcast every week. Go check it out and give it a listen. You will be glad you did. I think she wrote this particular episode especially for me in this season because she lays down some truth about anxiety and giving our worries over to God. There were some extremely helpful tips in here, along with some fun and laughs. Thank you, Cheryl. You're amazing. I really appreciate your review. If you also want to leave a rating or review, you can go over to iTunes and leave one there. I would be so grateful. It just helps get the word out about the podcast. You know, the more good reviews you have, the more iTunes will push your podcast out there to others that might want to take a listen. So thank you guys in advance for that. And if you want to be a financial supporter of the podcast, you can head over to patreon.com/gritandwit. That's patreon.com/gritandwit. And I am especially grateful to all those who become financial supporters and all of you who are praying for the podcast. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Speaking of prayer, last week we talked about combating our anxiousness, worry, and stress with prayer and supplication. So on today's episode, I want to ask you a question about prayer. Is it your first response or last resort? Have you ever been in a situation where you have tried everything in your own strength to change or fix something? You've literally exhausted all of your efforts. You've reached out to help from everyone you can think of, and to no avail. Finally, when nothing else has helped and you're done, right? You don't have anything else. You're like, there's nothing left to do but pray. I think we've all been there, especially if we are naturally inclined to take control and fix things ourselves. And so how often do we wait until we become desperate before we take whatever it is to God? We may even avoid prayer if something feels too small to pray about. You know, how often have we walked around feeling sick and complained about it, but never asked God to help us and heal us? I believe that we might even walk around sick simply because we haven't asked the healer for help. And there are some of us walking around with broken hearts or messed up relationships or just living in misery because we have been trying to fix things on our own. And the thing we have to realize is that on our own, we can accomplish nothing. We need Jesus. And so we need to pray. Even Jesus himself prayed. It says in Mark 1:35, "Now in the morning, having risen a long while before daylight, he went out and departed to a solitary place, and there he prayed." And then again in Luke 5:16 says, Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness for prayer. He also taught on prayer often. So I would say that it should be a pretty big deal to us, and we should make sure that it's a staple and stable part of our lives. So how do we change our response? How do we change our instinct response from let me fix it to let me take it to God? How do we shift our prayers from being last resort prayers to being first response prayers? I think the first things first is that we have to make it a consistent thing in our lives. We have to make it a priority. We have to pray consistently. Because prayer is more than just going to God with what we have a need for, or what we want, or how we need him to come, on our behalf. It's about creating and cultivating a relationship so that we know him. And we know that he is the one who is able to meet our needs. And it creates a ripple effect, because the more time we spend with God, the more we know him. And the more we know him, the more we understand his attributes, abilities, and promises. And the more we know those things, the more we understand we can depend on him and go to him to fulfill and come through on our behalf. And the more we understand that, the more we trust him. And the more we trust him, then the more likely we are to turn to him in times of trouble or crisis. I think we can over-spiritualize prayer a little bit. Yes, it is a spiritual practice. It's a spiritual discipline. But we need the practical application so that we actually pray and it becomes something that we do, not just something that we think about. Pay attention to that we call it a spiritual practice or a spiritual discipline, which means that it takes effort to make sure it gets done. So how do we make sure that prayer is a priority? What do we do about it? How do we make this spiritual practice a consistent thing in our lives? Number one is we have to set a time to pray. Put it on the schedule, right? Because we are all busy. And if we do not put it down, if we do not set time apart for it, if we do not make it a priority, then it won't get done. And we'll end up praying until we fall asleep. And that's probably not very long if you're as exhausted as most people are by the time it's bedtime. We make time for what we deem as important. So set time apart. Put a reminder in your phone, write it on your calendar, do whatever you need to do to make sure that you are praying each day. And this will take effort. We don't really like that. We don't really like that, do we? We don't really want something else to do. But if you work at it, it will be worth it. And you may mess up from time to time. You may, hit that okay, I'm going to pray and then not do it. There may be times where you slip up and, but I just want to encourage you to not give up, to keep going. It is a spiritual practice. It is something that we have to practice at. It's not something that we're going to be perfect at. It's something that we have to learn. It's just something that you have to work at and just keep going at. I had a pastor, Pastor Coralie Fraley, and she would say, if you make time for God, He will make time for you. And what she meant by that is, if you will dedicate your time to God, He will make sure you have the time to get accomplished the things that He's given you to do. And so I want to encourage you, if it feels like you don't have time to pray, if you make time to pray, He will make sure to reward you for that. He will make sure to give that time back to you, because He's a good God and He does not want us to be overwhelmed or overstretched. And maybe He might call you to lay some things down. But in order for us to know that, we have to talk to Him and we have to listen. And so prayer also, side note, we're going to get into this in some later episodes, but prayer is, yes, talking to God, but it's also receiving and listening to God. It may take some sacrifice. If the best time for you to pray is in the morning because it's the only quiet time in your house, then set that alarm and know that those few extra snoozes won't satisfy the way those few moments with Jesus will. And it may take staying up a little longer. It may mean turning off your TV or phone, and it may mean using your lunch break. Basically, do whatever you need to do to make the time, and it will be worth it. I want to challenge you. I want to issue a challenge that if you will take the time to pray, I want you to pay attention to how your time falls after that or falls because of that. I want you to see that God is faithful, that when we will give Him our time, that He is the author and creator of time, so somehow He manages to make sure that we have the time to do the things that we need to do. And so manage your time well. Set time apart to pray. Make sure you put it down and schedule that time to pray. Make prayer a priority. Number 2 is to avoid distractions. If you are easily distracted, and I feel like most everyone is distracted because we have so much going on, set a timer on your phone, literally, set a timer on your phone. Turn it on silent or do not disturb and turn it upside down, and then boom, you've got your timer set. You know that it's going to go off in the right amount of time and you're going to hear it, and focus on that time. And this may take learning to pray. It may take some time before you're spending 30 minutes in prayer, right? It may be 2 minutes, and 2 minutes is better than 0, okay? So don't neglect the 2 minutes because you feel like it's not as good as 30. Whatever time you have, give that to God. If it's 2 minutes, maybe you're like, I'm just going to start 2 minutes 3 times a day. 2 minutes, in the morning, 2 minutes at lunch, and 2 minutes in the evenings. Maybe you make it a family thing. Maybe you have your own private prayer time and then you have family prayer time, but really making it a consistent thing in your life and avoiding those distractions and making sure that you do whatever you need to do. And if it means setting a timer, you set a timer. Keep a notebook nearby for any of those random thoughts that pop into your head, like I need to pick up cheese from the grocery store or whatever it might be. Those random thoughts and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to forget this. And so what we normally do is we would pick our phone up and either go ahead and do whatever, or it may be, oh, I need to text this person. And so we pick our phone up to go ahead and text them. Well, what that does is that sends us off on a rabbit trail and we end up distracted. And so to keep a notebook and you can just jot it down, whatever it might be, so that when you're done praying, you can come back to that and you can just put it off. You can put it out of your mind because you wrote it down and it's done. If the room you're in is distracting you, close your eyes or get up and take a walk. Find a spot that brings you peace. Find a place, even if it's going to sit in your vehicle or whatever it might be, taking a walk around the block, whatever you need to do, go there so that you're not distracted by the laundry that you need to do or the dust that is on your desk, because I'm looking at the dust on my desk right now. And so making sure that you're not distracted. So doing everything possible to avoid distractions. And that may be also taking that. So maybe it's praying out loud instead of just thinking it in your head. Praying out loud may be a way to keep you from being distracted. You may write down your prayer request and then pray over those prayer requests. And so it's avoiding that distraction of your mind getting pulled away on other things. Maybe you use a prayer journal. That helps you avoid distraction, and then you can come back and see where God's answered those prayers, which is super cool. So I really advise making a prayer journal. Maybe you don't write your prayers out, but you can write down what you're praying for so that you can see God and where he comes through on your behalf. Also, find accountability. So find someone who can check in on you and who you can check in on. Maybe you set a prayer time together. Hey, we're both going to pray at this time every day. Or you set whatever prayer times really work with you. Check in on one another. Make sure that you are still praying. Making sure, like, if you want to share prayer requests, that's a great thing to do as well. These are the things that you can pray for. For me, how can I pray for you? So maybe it's your family, or maybe it's a friend, or whoever it might be. But really find an accountability partner, because when we sign up with other people, we're more likely to stay on track with things, right? The last thing, which is really number one, but I saved the best for last, and that is ask God for help. God, help me to pray. So it's funny that we're praying a prayer to help us to pray, but that's the coolness of God, is that whatever we have need of, we can ask his help. And so I want to challenge you, like, when maybe you're listening to this right now and you're like, I want to step up my prayer life. I want to be someone who prays consistently. In 1 Thessalonians 5, I think it's 5:18, it says, pray without ceasing. God, I want to have that kind of prayer life where prayer is something that is just continually on my lips. Father, help me to pray. And so you can say that out loud right now. Father, help me to pray. God, I want to pray. I want to be consistent in prayer. Show me the time that you want me to pray. Show me how I need to avoid distraction. Show me who I can call on to be my accountability partner. Lord, let me know what I need to write down in my prayer journal. So making prayer a priority and then asking God to help us pray. And over the next couple of episodes, we're actually going to take a deep dive into prayer. We're going to be talking about the different types of prayers, how to pray scripture, different prayer styles. So if you have any questions that you want answered about prayer, please feel free to message me over on Instagram. You can find me at Becca D. Caldwell, or on Facebook, The Battleground with Rebecca Caldwell. And as always, you can email me, Becca@gritandwitpodcast.com. If you have prayer requests that you want to share with me, that you want me to be praying with you, please feel free to send me a direct message, or you can email me as well. I would be happy to pray with you. Here's hoping that next week I do not have another crazy dog story to share with you guys. I am looking forward to chatting with you next week. Don't forget, if you've enjoyed the podcast, share it with a friend, because sharing is caring. Make sure you go leave a rating or review over on iTunes. If you want to become a patron, you can head on over to patreon.com/gritandwit. That's all I got for you guys today. So as always, I'll talk to you next week, friends. See you then.